Would you first help me greet our campuses that are with us, Sherman, Brownwood, Broken Bow. So grateful to be joined with you. You can go to Matthew chapter 11. Take me just a little bit to get there. We're talking about breaking our addiction to busy. Sometimes when asked, like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good, just busy. Sometimes we say that with a little downcast shadow. Sometimes we're like, yeah, I'm busy, like you're a really important person. You're probably not busy because you're important. You're busy because you don't know how to manage your life in following Jesus. At least that's how I feel myself, is that I'm not busy because I'm important or have a lot to do. I'm busy because I don't know how to follow an unhurried Jesus. There's things we all have to grow in to mature into being able to follow Jesus, who is unhurried. Ronald Rolheiser says we are, in this age, distracting ourselves into spiritual oblivion. Pathological busyness, distraction, and restlessness are major blocks today with our spiritual lives. The idea is that hurry and intimacy cannot coexist. You cannot be both hurried and intimate. You might be able to communicate. My wife and I, we joke about how it takes nearly an hour a day of conversation just to know what's happening and who needs to be where and who's responsible for what. Just with 5 kids, it takes a lot of conversational time just to make sure we're all on the same page. So you might be able to briefly connect, you might be able to communicate a little bit, but you cannot develop the kind of intimacy that is loving and sacrificial in a relationship and also be hurried in your schedules or in your soul. Corrie ten Boom says, she's attributed to saying, if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. Sin might not be your biggest problem, but why is busyness such a big deal? Why do we need to eliminate hurry and busy? Well, Jesus' great command, when asked what's the great command, he says it's love, to love God and to love people. And here's the deal, hurry and love are incompatible. They cannot coexist simultaneously. When you look at Paul's first definition of love in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4, it's patient. And you cannot tell me that you can be hurried and patient. As a dad of 5 children, when we need to go and it's time to go and I'm in a hurry and we are busy and we have to get somewhere, I can tell you in that moment, I am not patient at all and therefore not loving. You cannot be hurried, busy, and loving. When you're frenzied, you are not loving. Japanese theologian Kosuke Koyama, in his book, The 3 Mile an Hour God, says this: God walks slowly because he is love. If he is not love, he would have gone much faster. Love has its speed. It is an inner speed. It is a spiritual speed. It is a different kind of speed from the technological speed to which we are accustomed. It is slow, yet it is Lord over all other speeds, since it is the speed of love. The bottom line, it's hard to be hurried and follow the unhurried Jesus. So we need to learn how to unhurry our lives. And here's the deal. The solution to a busy life, the solution to a hurried life, is not more time. Not a single amen, not a single nod, nothing. I don't know what the response to that was, but I'm guessing that's because that's what we all think. When we have an over busy life, the solution is not more time. You and I have the exact same 24 hours. Nobody gets more, no matter how much I've interceded and prayed. We have not gotten an extra hour a day or a day a week. It hasn't happened. We get the same amount of time as everybody else. So more time isn't the solution. Let me look again at Matthew chapter 11, these verses. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. Here's the key. It's coming to Jesus and taking his yoke. There's two invitations here. One is to come to him. That one is pretty self-evident. That one makes a lot of sense to us. We recognize we don't have the solution ourselves. We're unable to in the big scheme of things, we're not able to save ourselves. We're not able to deliver ourselves. But even in the small things of life, the things that busy our lives and hurry our schedules and get inside our souls, even those things were to come to him. Well, that's pretty self-evident. But what is this, take my yoke? Because if you don't understand that, then you're going to struggle to hear what he's trying to say and what his invitation is. Of the many things that could be said here, I will keep it brief by referring to a commentator, Frederick Bruner, who says this: a yoke is a work instrument. Thus, when Jesus offers a yoke, he offers what we might think tired workers need least. They need a mattress or a vacation, not a yoke. But Jesus realizes that the most restful gift he can give the tired is a new way to carry life, a fresh way to bear responsibilities. Realism sees that life is a succession of burdens. We cannot get away from them. That instead of offering escape, Jesus offers equipment. Jesus means that obedience to his Sermon on the Mount, that would be his yoke. A rabbi had a yoke. It was a rabbi's teaching that became his yoke, and you followed his teaching. You didn't just agree to believe certain true things that was said by a rabbi. It meant that you came under the wholeness of that teaching as a lifestyle. That's what he means by obedience to his teaching, the Sermon on the Mount, his yoke will develop in us a balance and a way of carrying life that will give more rest than the way we have been living. That's his yoke. He calls us into an overall lifestyle that makes it easy to bear and light. It isn't just escape, it's equipment. Dallas Willard says of this yoke, he says there's a secret to the easy yoke. There's a secret. When he talks about his yoke is easy, he says, well, there's a whole chapter, probably my favorite book from Dallas Willard, The Spirit of the Disciplines, whole chapter on this one verse. And he calls it the secret of the easy yoke is this. It involves living as Jesus lived in the entirety of his life, adopting his overall lifestyle. Our mistake is to think that following Jesus consists in loving our enemies or going the second mile or turning the other cheek, suffering patiently and hopefully, and any number of all of his other teachings while living the rest of our lives just as everyone else around us does. It's a strategy bound to fail. So the point isn't just to go obey his instructions and then live like everybody else. Maybe in summary, you could say, if you want to experience the life of Jesus, you have to adopt his overall lifestyle. Okay. I'll circle this as long as necessary. So with the remainder of this series, and I try to sprinkle these things in through many of my teachings, spiritual disciplines and what they are and what they're not. In summary, spiritual disciplines are not righteousness, they're not holiness, they are wisdom. You don't appeal to God in spiritual disciplines as a stake in your righteousness or your holiness. That's dumb. What Jesus did for you is what makes us right and holy, and our faith in Jesus. But there is wisdom to spiritual disciplines, and if you look at Jesus' life, it isn't just what he said, it's how he lived. And we want to see how he lived and adopt his overall lifestyle. And when it comes to finding rest for our souls, taking his yoke, there are a few specific disciplines that will help us unhurry our life. Well, I know that's not good grammar, but it makes the point. We need to unhurry our life, and so we need to develop certain habits that help us unhurry our lives, that are anchored in Scripture. They're not just good ideas. They're not just self-help hacks for life, but things that we see in Jesus, things that we see in Scripture that help us adopt Jesus's overall lifestyle. There are many more than 3, but I want to hit 3. And we're going to hit one each week. Today, we're going to hit the first one, which is be Sabbath. But the 3 I want to look at through the course of this series is Sabbath, simplicity, and then silence and solitude. Things that are very difficult in our world, things that are not coming natural to us, that the entire world is conspiring against us to adopt these things. Some of these may resonate more deeply with you than others. Some of these may make you mad. Some of these may feel like fresh water to a thirsty soul. Either way, if we don't start adopting the lifestyle that Jesus has that includes these things, then we're not going to be able to perform in the moment with things like loving our enemy, which is the ultimate standard of discipleship. You don't spontaneously love your enemy. You spontaneously hate them and take revenge. So if you want to live like Jesus in the highlight moments, we have to adopt the overall lifestyle. And far more of our life as a Christian is in the hidden and in the unseen and in the boring day-to-day life that then creates the capacity for our lives to look like Jesus in the highlight moments. So we're going to hit Sabbath. Most of us, this is what John Mark Comer says, most of us have more than enough time to work with. You're like, yeah, but you don't know my schedule. Even in busy seasons of life, we just have to reallocate our time to seek first the kingdom of God, not the kingdom of entertainment. That's Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God. We like that idea when it's in red in the Bible, but when it comes to actually arranging our life around it, we like to keep it in Scripture, not in life. I'm just going to assume for how quiet it is in the first 10 minutes of this message that it's going to be this quiet the rest of the time. I'm going to assume, this is what I'm going to assume about you, all our camps. You're thinking. You're not mad, you're thinking. Good, that's what I'm going to assume. Okay, Sabbath. There is a lot. This is a giant subject. Many books are written about this. I am not going to be able to address everything about this in one single sermon, okay? In the notes, I have far more than I can say out loud. I intentionally put more in the notes so that if I say something that makes you kind of go, oh, I don't know about that, there's more that I've said here to be able to explain. And we need to be able to address Sabbath in as much holistic as I can, but we got to get to the things on how to practice it, not just all the theology of it. This is rooted in creation. You look at this in Genesis 1 and 2 at the climax of creation, the very end. God rested on the seventh day. So I want to approach Sabbath in 3 things, and we're only going to really be able to look at one. But if you're looking at Sabbath, you're going to look at first the theology of the Sabbath, second, the principle of the Sabbath, and then third, the practice of the Sabbath. Those are 3 ways that we can approach Sabbath. Let me first at this anchor point, dealing mostly theologically about this. We are not under the law. If you don't have any amens for today, put them all in that line right there, okay? We are not under the law. We do not appeal to God for righteousness or holiness based on our capacity to keep rules. That strategy has never worked, and it doesn't work, and it's not what God calls us to. We have been delivered from the curse of the law in Jesus. Our appeal to God for righteousness and holiness is based completely and entirely 100% on what Jesus has done for us and our faith in him. So addressing the Sabbath immediately falls into Sabbath keeping. And I don't want to go. I have no desire to bring legalism, to sprinkle grace with a little bit of legalism. That's not my interest. It's not at all. And those who make the biggest stance about keeping the Sabbath because that's what makes us right before God are missing the point. If you feel like you have to keep the Sabbath in order to be holy before God, you have to keep the entire law, which is 613 laws. It includes things like standing for the gray-haired. I'm just saying. My dad is such an anti-legalist. I quoted that to him, and then like for a week, every time he came into my presence, I stood up and I said, I'm just following the law. But everything in the law, including the Sabbath, is type and shadow of Jesus. Colossians chapter 2, verse 16 says this, "So don't let anyone condemn you for what you eat or drink, or not celebrating certain holy days or new moon ceremonies or Sabbaths. Don't let anyone condemn you about this. For these rules are only shadows of the reality yet to come, and Christ himself is that reality." There is a lot of theology in this. Jesus is our Sabbath rest before God, okay? And just saying that there's a lot there doesn't mean that we can actually go there. It just means there's a lot there. If that immediately starts getting, yeah, but God said this Sabbath has to be kept Friday night to Saturday night, you just need to meet Jesus in a deeper way. And I'm not downing. We'll get to the practice, and I don't want to disrespect people who hold dear their practice of Sabbath. But if you are appealing to God, if you're appealing to your Sabbath keeping as your righteousness and holiness that makes you better than everybody, you are a legalist and you're in the wrong. Okay. The principle of Sabbath. The principle of Sabbath is this. It's not remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The principle of the Sabbath is 6 days you shall work, and on the seventh you rest, keeping it holy unto the Lord. So the principle is 6 plus 1. The principle of Sabbath is not Saturday, or the way it got morphed into early Christian practice, Sunday. It's not that Saturday is the Sabbath. It is in Jewish history and culture. But the principle that points to is 6 days you shall do all your labor, and on the seventh you rest. Now, if that is Saturday, great. For most people in our age and rhythm, that probably should be Sunday. But regardless, it's 6 days you shall work. So the commandment, the fourth commandment is not remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. That's the first line of the fourth commandment. If you look at the 10 commandments and by word count made it a pie chart, the Sabbath would be 25 to 30% of the entire 10 commandments. That's how many words are in the fourth commandment. And so the first line of it, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy, is not the whole of the commandment. It's 6 days you shall do all your work. So for those who are thinking that by honoring Sabbath is getting lazy, and all those lazy people who never work, 6 days you do your work. If you are being lazy, 6 days you shall do your work. Not 3, not 5, 6 days you shall do your work. But the principle is 6 plus 1. In Romans chapter 14, the Apostle Paul, these are the kinds of things that got the Apostle Paul killed, okay? Romans chapter 14, verse 4, speaking to Jews and Gentiles, the entire purpose of the book of Romans, the reason why the Apostle Paul wrote the book of Mormon, I'm so sorry, the book of Romans. Y'all silence is making me nervous. The entire reason the Apostle Paul wrote the book of Romans is to get Jews and Gentiles to get along. Did you know that? It's written right there at the end of the letter. They split, they were fighting, and they were creating different house churches, some Jews, some Gentiles. And he's like, that's Antichrist. And so he goes after him. And he says, who are you to condemn someone else's servant? This is verse 4. Their own master will judge whether they stand or fall. And with the Lord's help, they will stand and receive his approval. In the same way, so we are the Lord's servant. He's like, you are not in any position to condemn the Lord's servant. In the same way, some think one day is more holy than another day, while others think every day is alike. You should be fully convinced that whichever day you choose is acceptable. Verse 6, those who worship the Lord on a special day do it to honor him. That's the principle. You honor him. And if for you, you are absolutely convinced that at 6 p.m. on Friday night has to start the Sabbath, are you doing it under the Lord or are you doing it to be a legalist? If you do it under the Lord, then you should have grace and mercy, and you should be so close to the Lord that you just can't stand it. But if you do it to be a legalist, you're going to be miserable and make the rest of us miserable. You're going to be a Pharisaical, just hypocrite. I hate that stuff. So regardless of what specific day the Sabbath becomes for you, what makes it holy is not the designated 24-hour time span. What makes it holy is that you specifically give it to the Lord as worship to him. Now, the practice of Sabbath. Let me actually read the fourth commandment. Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. That is not the end of the commandment. It goes all the way through verse 11. Verse 9, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. This is what's important. It is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, your livestock, the sojourner is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. 6 days you shall do your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord. It belongs to the Lord. And this is where the first century Pharisees got off. They had noble intent, I think, maybe a few centuries before Jesus. The idea was that if we could get back to keeping our part of the covenant, God will bless us again. And I think it started with noble intent. It was wrong, but it was noble, I think. You get a couple hundred years into that kind of thinking, by the time you get to Jesus, you have Pharisees that are nitpicking Sabbath breakers and had all sorts of fence laws of what you could and couldn't do on the Sabbath. And Jesus just went after him. As a matter of fact, most of his healings, the scriptures pay attention to the fact that they were on the Sabbath. And the biggest point that was made from Jesus about this practice is in Mark chapter 2, verse 27 and 28. He says, the Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, and not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. The Sabbath was a gift from the Lord for us to enjoy him. That we are no longer slaves to our work, to our labor. This was a reprieve from the Genesis 3 curse on the ground, that our labor and our work became toil. Work and labor is a part of us expressing the image of God. God worked 6 days. We work, and we are in his image. And so we work. 6 days we work. But we also rest. And it's not so that there's a bunch of legalistic requirements that we have to check all the boxes so that we can be right. No, the Sabbath was a gift from the Lord to creation, to people. And it's to be enjoyed, not a bunch of legalistic requirements that have to be kept. And it's to our detriment that I think we've lost that rhythm in our lives. Andrew Sullivan, a reporter for the New York Times Magazine, wrote an article a couple years ago entitled, I Used to Be a Human Being. And he says this, that Judeo-Christian tradition recognized a critical distinction and tension between noise and silence, between getting through the day and getting a grip on one's whole life. The Sabbath, the Jewish institution co-opted by Christianity, was a collective imposition of relative silence, a moment of calm to reflect on our lives under the light of eternity. It helped define much of Western public life once a week for centuries, only to dissipate with scarcely a passing regret into the commercial cacophony of the past couple of decades. It reflected a now battered belief that a sustained spiritual life is simply unfeasible for most mortals without these refuges from noise and work to buffer us and remind us who we really are. The guy's not even a believer, and he recognizes this. And so when it comes to the practice of the Sabbath, this is not about keeping laws. This is about recognizing a rhythm God put into creation, and he made us in his image. That there is a rhythm and a cadence to life. This became one of the biggest criticisms of the prophets to the Jewish people. In Jeremiah chapter 17, I'm going to read this in the Message Bible because I just really like how punchy this is. The context of this is from verse 21 to 27, and I encourage you to read it in context, but I got to start in verse 22. Don't use the Sabbath to do business as usual. Keep the Sabbath day holy as I commanded your ancestors. They never did it, as you know. They paid no attention to what I said and went about their own business, refusing to be guided or instructed by me. But now take seriously what I tell you. Quit desecrating the Sabbath by busily going about your own work, and keep the Sabbath day holy by not doing business as usual. There is a special day God gave us to not be business as usual, and we are far more conformed into this world and the rhythms and cycles of this world. There is a secular rhythm. The secular rhythm to our modern age, and it's just simply work, vacation, work, vacation, if you even take one. And just sort of humorously, it's work, vacay mode, and then we're gonna hashtag whatever for a few days or a week or whatever, and then back to work. And then that gets projected onto social channels, and those of us who become slaves to our work that maybe can't afford to take a vacation or can't start longing for the good life that's just a breeze and leisure. When the Lord, for all of his creatures and all of his people, including the servants in the house, including the animals in the barn, was work 6 days, the seventh rest. Work 6 days and the seventh rest. Work 6 days and the seventh rest. The reason why our vacations don't actually meet the need is because we don't live with a sense of rhythm and cadence to our normal everyday life. This is a part of the easy yoke of Jesus, is adopting the overall lifestyle. Instead of what Romans 12:2 says, when we copy the behavior and customs of the world, we got to transform the way we think. A writer on Sabbath, A.J. Swoboda from Portland, says this: Sabbath has largely been forgotten by the church, which has uncritically mimicked the rhythms of the industrial and success-based obsessed West. The result? Our road-weary, exhausted churches have largely failed to integrate Sabbath into their lives as vital elements of Christian discipleship. It is not as though we do not love God. We love God deeply. We just don't know how to sit with God anymore. The result of our Sabbath amnesia is that we have become perhaps the most emotionally exhausted, psychologically overworked, spiritually now malnourished people in history. Again, it's not that we don't love God, we just don't know how to sit still with him. Whew, I knew it would be heavy, but I didn't think it'd be that heavy. All right, so with my remaining time, how do we do this? If I'm not fighting you about legalism, if you want to be a legalist, be a legalist. You're probably going to hate this church in some way. But if you're here and you're a legalist, just keep it to yourself. If you don't want to be a legalist, but you do want to integrate this, there's a way. And I'm going to adopt, I think Pete Scazzaro, a writer and pastor from New York, actually gave one of the best, very simple way to observe, to see and understand Sabbath, and then to integrate it into your life. And he puts it in, there's 4 basic elements to Sabbath: stop, rest, delight, and contemplate. Stop work, enjoy rest, practice delight, and contemplate God. Stop, rest, delight, contemplate. Okay, stop. This is the meaning of the word Sabbath, in Hebrew, Shabbat. It means to cease or to stop. That's just what it literally means. So it's a day to just stop. Stop working, stop striving, stop worrying, stop judging. Just stop. Most of us can't stop until we are finished. Finished with whatever we think we need to do. We feel, if I just would complete this project, if I'll just finish this assignment, if I'll just knock off the rest of this task list, if I just answer these emails, return these phone calls and text messages, because I just can't simply rest until the work is done. And here's the blunt truth: it's never gonna get done. And here's a more blunt truth. One day, you're going to die, and you're going to have unfinished projects and assignments and work to do. I don't mean to be coarse about it, but you and I are finite creatures. It's not that our work doesn't matter. There's 6 days given to it. It's that rest matters just as much. We have to stop. Listen, God is very well capable of running this world without you. You are here as a gracious and merciful blessing from God. You and I have no right to be here. As if God's like, I just cannot let this person die because there's too much that they have to do. And I just can't get it done without them. That's nobody except Jesus ever. So the reality is that, like, listen, there's always going to be unfinished work. There always will be. And you can't make that the rule. I'm not saying that there aren't certain things that you really do need to get done to stop. But figure out what those things are instead of letting everything be that. And we'll talk about the day of preparation here in just a second, but that's what 6 days are for. We just have to properly plan and understand our 6 days instead of unthinkingly work all the time and think that we just can't stop until all this is done. Great. Figure out what all this is and find a way to do it in 6 days. But the truth is, we have to get used to getting off the throne. You're just not that big a deal. That's why we talked about expectations last week. You don't live at the mercy of everybody else's expectations. That doesn't give you an excuse to be a jerk. But it is important that you're not bound by this. No one is Lord but Jesus. Stop letting our task lists be Lord. Stop letting bosses be Lord. Stop letting spouses or children be Lord. Stop letting housework be Lord. If your housework or your job dominates so much of your mental real estate that you can't stop until it's all done, you're a slave and you need freed. God's at work taking care of the universe, and he manages quite well without us. So there's at least one day where we can rest and sleep. There's only one who neither slumbers nor sleep. Psalm 121 verse 4. That's God. There's only one who neither slumbers nor sleeps. We are given a day, in the very least, to be still and know that he is God. And to at least attempt to walk out Jesus's promise that we can stop worrying about life and trust our loving Father. So the question that you got to ask yourself and think through, legitimately think through, take time to think through, what activities constitute work for you? And that's paid and unpaid. Some of you have tons of work that's not paid. You might be in retirement and you're not in a paid job, but there's still work to do. Don't think that your life is just leisure. If you retire thinking that the rest of your life is leisure, you have just fast forwarded your death date. There's tons of research that says you quit having purpose in life, you die quicker. So what constitutes work that you will refuse to edge in so that it is truly a day of rest, worship, and delight? So what is that for you? Because there's boundaries, and you have to set boundaries. 6 days you do that, and there's one that you don't. Rest. So with all that time that you're not working, what do? You rest. Well, what does that mean? Whatever rests you. I don't know what that is. My guess, it has something to do with sleep in some way. Our world is notoriously undersleeping. And so whatever delights and replenishes you, what restores energy for you? That might be napping. For you, it might be working out. It might be going for long walks, reading a novel, watching a good movie, going out for dinner, spending time with friends, sitting in silence and solitude with nothing to do all day. I don't know, but whatever replenishes energy, Make sure you do that day. Because it isn't just about stopping and then sitting around worrying about what you're not getting done. That's not Sabbath. That's legalism. What's going to replenish you? Do that. To do that, though, requires some planning and making sure you utilize the rest of the week to do the tasks of life that consume your energy and fill us with worry. So, things like planning for your week, paying the bills, balancing the budget, cleaning the house, fighting traffic or crowds, shopping, doing loads of never-ending laundry. It never ends. It's the one thing that will always be there for you. If you need comfort and think that everybody's abandoned you, laundry will not. It'll always be there. All those things that constitute work, find a way to do that in 6. Here's a few possibilities you may consider replacing with rest. Obviously, work would be one that you need to replace with rest. But things like physical exhaustion, replace that. Don't do that. Rest. Things like hurriedness. What if you could take a day and give yourself permission to not be in a hurry at all? Period. Stop multitasking. I'm just telling you, there's so much research on this. There is no such thing as multitasking. There is no such thing. Your brain cannot do 2 things at once. It can only rapidly switch between 2 things, which ends up destroying your focus to where now, clinically speaking, we have less of an attention span than a goldfish. Goldfish have 8 seconds worth of an attention span. Right now, our generation, 7. Stop multitasking. What about competitiveness? A day where you don't have to be number 1. Worry, decision making. I get decision fatigue. That's why if you see me during the week, I probably am wearing the exact same thing as I wear every day of the week. Why? I don't want to make that decision. I get tired of making decisions. There's a lot of important decisions that have to be made, and I don't like making all of them. And so the things that I can stop making decisions, I don't make decisions. What am I going to eat today for Sabbath? I don't know. Whatever. I'll figure it out. Technology. Talking or catching up on errands. It's not a catch-up day. I can't use the word, but you can look up what Eugene Peterson says about a day that we try to fit catching up on work onto our Sabbath. I can't say that through a microphone, but it's blunt and it gets in your face. So what activities or non-activities give you rest and replenish your energy? What activities drain your energy that you need to refrain from in order to rest? Delight. I got to move quickly through this. God, after finishing the work in Genesis 1:31, says it's very good. God delighted over his creation. There's joy. There's a sense of completion and wonder and play. And most of us struggle with walking in or receiving joy and pleasure. And so on Sabbath, we're called to enjoy and delight in creation, to slow down, actually taste your food instead of just scarfing it down. Have fun, play. When was the last time you did something playful? Entertainment may be a delight, but it can also be an escape. So make sure that you're exercising discernment on what that is. So what could you do for 24 hours that would fill your soul with deep, throbbing joy? Do that. What kind of activities bring you delight, and how can you incorporate them? And then contemplate. It's holy to the Lord. Pondering the love of God still remains the central focus of Sabbath. And that's why I do think that Sundays for many people are the best Sabbath, because it involves worship and honoring the Lord and anchoring our day and our week around our worship. Eugene Peterson says the Sabbath is not primarily about us or how it benefits us. It's about God and how God forms us. And he says this, I don't see any way out of it. If we're going to live appropriately in creation, we must keep the Sabbath. I don't have time to talk about the day of preparation, but basically it's this. Get the work done that has to get done, and then stop. Plan your 6 days, and then the last day is a preparation day for the Sabbath. And it acts as a bit of a liturgy to get you ready to rest. And here's kind of just where I want to end, at least this service today. The thing about skipping Sabbaths is eventually it's like putting a charge on credit card. The bill comes due. In 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 20, this is after the exile. This is what is said in verse 20. He took into exile in Babylon those who had escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him. This is talking about the king of Babylon. And to his sons until the establishment of the kingdom of Persia. Verse 21, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths. All the days that it lay desolate, it kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. Here's the deal. They didn't keep the Sabbath days. They didn't keep the Sabbath years. They didn't keep any of those things. And it was like putting the land, charging the land a credit card bill that eventually came due. And exile was to give the land rest for the exact number of years that were skipped in the Sabbath years. The bill came due. And it was a part of that covenant. It was so basically, God made you and I to live in rhythm. And what happens is when we don't live in rhythm, our bodies fight against it. This is what Wayne Muller says about this. If we do not allow for a rhythm of rest in our overly busy lives, illness becomes our Sabbath. Our pneumonia, our cancer, our heart attack, our accidents create Sabbath for us. That is not how God made us. He made us to enjoy Sabbath instead of us crash landing and then now we have to rest. Don't get to that point before you start honoring the Sabbath. And again, this doesn't make you holier, doesn't make you righteous. It makes you sane. It gives you wisdom. It makes us able to be patient and present with people when we learn how to slow down, how to be quiet, how to enjoy life. And what happens is when we infuse Sabbath the way God intended as a gift to us and a gift for us, that kind of spirit of restfulness gets infused into the rest of our work. We still work, but it's infused with a restfulness, a joy, a play, a delight. And we become a pretty big witness to a world that is in darkness and busyness and distraction. And so just my encouragement is not to try to be holy and keep the Sabbath, but to make the Sabbath holy by paying attention to it, resting and delighting in God. Amen? I'm going to release our campuses, and I bless you for all that God's doing, and that you take this and take it before the Lord and contemplate, and those who love you and doing this together. And so I release you to steward whatever God's doing in your service right now.